Hello and welcome back to Learn It from a Layman. I am Carl Christensen. I'm joined by Cameron and Avi.
Hi.
Hi, Avi. You're not new to the podcast. You were on our last book review series as well. So, last book review podcast.
That was me.
It was the not nameless forevermore Avi. So, okay, and Cameron's obviously one of the OG podcast hosts, so you all know Cameron. Tim might be joining us, but he might not. It depends on whether or not we let him in. So don't expect to see him. Okay, so this time that we're recording is just a little bit before Halloween, and in honor of the spooky season, we thought our book review, our book discussion, our book club series would be about Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, which is, Avi, that's you wanted me to call it by the full name, right?
Yes. And I appreciate your attempt.
And for those that don't know
I tried.
the story of Prometheus, it is the person who built wings out of wax and flew too close to the sun.
No.
I will confess
Prometheus is the one who gave humanity fire.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, darn it.
And then got his liver pecked out by an eagle forevermore.
Oh, that's... oh, man.
Yes.
I was totally wrong on that. Thank you, Avi, for correcting me.
Okay, well, that's good. Prometheus does not play a large role in the book.
We're talking about the modern Prometheus.
That's correct. Okay, yes. Maybe a little bit of, contextual knowledge is helpful. So thank you, Avi. But speaking of contextual information, so the book, Frankenstein, was written by Mary Shelley. And so before we dive into the various aspects of the book, which are, I mean, we could spend a long time discussing this book. So we're going to each hit on some of our favorite things to talk about. But before we do that, it seems very worthwhile to discuss Mary Shelley, who was a very interesting woman herself and did a lot of, accomplished a lot in a relatively short life. She died early 50s, I believe. Oh, yeah, here it says 53. So, she
is that really that young back in the 1800s?
Yeah, maybe not back then, but now by today's standards, it seems 53 is dying young. But okay, so we could go through a lot of facts about Mary Shelley as well. Like I said, she accomplished a lot, but Frankenstein was her first novel, her first book that she wrote as a part of a ghost story challenge. She spent some time
and her friends and husband had a competition to see who could best write the best horror story. It was her, Lord Byron, John Polidori, and Percy Shelley had a competition to see who could write the best horror story, resulting in her writing Frankenstein. She's also notable for creating one of the first apocalypse novels, The Last Man, as well as several other works. Frankenstein is her most well-known, but she wrote several more novels, such as Valpurga, Perkin Warbeck, various other things, and the first known apocalypse novel. Can I say some fun facts about her?
Yeah, shoot.
Okay, so her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, was a very, very well-known part of the scientific revolution and Age of Enlightenment. She was a massive advocate for women's rights and was very well known for her philosophy and social commentary. She died just 11 days after giving birth to Mary Shelley, and so she was raised by her father, William Godwin. She learned to write her name by tracing her mother's name on her gravestone.
Wow.
And that is also where Percy Shelley began courting her.
At the gravestone?
At the graveyard.
No way.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Wow, that's crazy.
After Percy Shelley died, his heart calcified, which means that it grew bone around it. So when he was cremated at the funeral, she plucked his heart from the fire, which hadn't burned because of the bone, and kept it with her um, in her pocket until she decided to store it in her desk drawer, wrapped in one of his poems, Adonis, which is a poem about him telling the stars and nature not to mourn him. Of these poems, there is none more goth. All this to say that Mary Shelley is the original goth.
Yes, yes, and honestly, the Frankenstein is supposed. I mean, it was essentially the first gothic horror book and the first science fiction book. Yeah, exactly. So she kind of spawned two different genres, and
three if you count the post-apocalypse one.
That's true. That's true.
Which is a different story. Yes.
Yes, we'll do that a different book club day. Okay, but one other thing about Mary Shelley. So yeah, I mean, very unique life lived, but her and her husband Percy Shelley, he was married when they started courting.
That is true.
And so they ran off together, and she got pregnant and miscarried the baby. But yeah, and then his wife committed suicide. So there's a lot of stuff going around at the time, and a lot of
early 18th century drama.
Right, exactly. She's 17 when they start courting, so it gives you the idea that she's just very young. The fact that she wrote this book, she wrote Frankenstein, I believe, as an 18-year-old and published it as a 20-year-old. Yeah, I mean, that's insane, right? That's as we're going to discuss about the book Frankenstein. I mean, just the literary masterpiece that it is. Like the idea that an 18-year-old girl, young woman, obviously, was just so gifted and able to get that out, like truly incredible. So, but yeah, let's. Any other unique facts about Mary Shelley before we dive into Frankenstein?
I wanted to fact check the average life expectancy of a woman in the 1800s. Our great super engine of information that starts with a G says the average lifespan was between 25 to 40. So the fact that she lived to be 50 puts her.
But that's gonna include
that, so she was doing pretty well.
That's going to include childhood mortality. If you make it past childhood, generally you're able to live.
No, that
I think that even until your 60s. So.
No, it says.
Anyways. I do have a bunch more fun facts, but they're mostly about her friend group, not about her herself. Her friend group is really funny because it included several renowned literary voices of the time, including Lord Byron, of course, her husband Percy Shelley, who was a very prolific poet, Keats.
Right. Oh yeah,
I forget all the other names.
Right. No, and that's actually okay. I'm going to tease something. So the last podcast we did about The Giver, I believe when I said that we're going to do Frankenstein, or maybe it was just the last podcast where we talked about the hearing. Anyway, I teased that we might share some information about Frankenstein that was new and unique, which is hard to do about a book that's been read so many times and is as old as Frankenstein is. But I actually do have some insight. I think that, well, not unique, is maybe not entirely unique, is different than you'll hear pretty much anywhere else. So I'm going to tease that to say that we're going to get to that at the end, and it has to do with the friend group that Mary Shelley was in when she wrote the book, because I do think it had a heavy influence on Frankenstein, and that the history there is really unique. So we'll come back to that. Okay, let's talk about Frankenstein. So plot summary. You want me to do that, Cameron? Avi, I don't know I can do it if.
So once upon a time,
from the beginning.
The story starts out nowhere near Frankenstein or anything to do with him, actually. It starts out with the captain of a ship on an expedition into the Arctic, and he is writing several letters to his sister Margaret. While he's doing so, he comes across our protagonist POV character, Victor Frankenstein, freezing to death on an iceberg in the middle of the Arctic. When he picks him up, the story is actually almost concluding. The majority of the story takes place as a recounting of events. So he brings Victor Frankenstein onto the ship, asks him what he was doing out there, and Victor says, "Let me start from the beginning." And he does. So when Victor Frankenstein was born, he was born to two very wealthy parents who frequently traveled, and he had the opportunity to come with them. One time, when they were traveling around, they encountered an orphanage filled with poor people, which is what you do when you're rich and traveling. You just go and find poor people and stare at them. But they saw
Right.
a beautiful blonde young girl who looked much more classy than the rest of the poor, dirty orphans, and decided to inquire about her. They learned that she was an Italian noble by birth, but because she had become an orphan, she was no longer wealthy and had to live in the poor, sad orphanage with the rest of the poor people. They decided, obviously, they could not allow this fate to befall the poor, once rich, young, beautiful girl, and decided to take her with them, as you do when you're rich. Um, so the young woman, the young girl named Elizabeth, was raised as Victor Frankenstein's playmate slash uh sister slash other child in the house. Um and they grew up together and were best friends. Also, Henry Clerval was there and was also childhood friends with them. So, Frankenstein had always displayed a lifelong interest in alchemy and the sciences, and when he became college aged, he left to go to college, where he felt that he'd learned all he could, decided I'd had enough of this, and dropped out to pursue his own experimental idea of the creation of life.
Facebook. Oh,
That's
I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about Mark Zuckerberg. Okay, go ahead.
I just want to point out here, Victor Frankenstein is not a doctor. Anyone who says Frankenstein is the doctor, not the monster, is lying to you. Victor Frankenstein is a college dropout. He has no credentials to his name. He is, in fact, a hack and a fraud. Anyway, he goes off to do his experiment as, like, a 19-year-old and starts digging up graves, doing his mad science thing, and eventually creates a corpse that he then animates, and it wakes up. And he's like, "My experiment, it was a success." And then he looks it in the eyes, and its eyes are yellow, which freaks him out so bad that he passes out. When he wakes up, the creature is gone, and his good buddy Henry Clerval is there being like, "Hey man, what's going on? Why did you pass out? Are you okay?" Uh, Due to the stress of the experiment escaping, he's become sick for several weeks, while Clerval nourishes him back to health. Meanwhile, with the creature, he goes off into the woods, learns about fire like a modern hunter gatherer pre what's the word? Caveman.
Right.
Neanderthal, that's the word I was
Neanderthal.
looking
Yeah.
for. Learns about fire, learns about the beasts in the wood that bites, and comes across a small town filled with French people. Unfortunately, this is where he decides to learn his language, the way of reading, writing, and speech.
Who wants to learn
Um,
French?
he comes across a hovel, hovel. Is it hovel or hovel?
I've always said
Hovel.
hovel.
Mhm.
He comes across a hovel attached to a house where a blind man lives with his family. He stays out of sight, observing the family for a while, learning their ways, learning their French, learning their life story, and on occasion meets the blind man who can't see how monstrous he is and just thinks he's an average guy, and tells him his life story. Once the family sees him, however, they become also freaked out, call him a monster, chase him around, kick him out, and generally just make him feel sad. After that, he rescues a small child from drowning, but her father, upon seeing this, mistakes it for an attack and shoots him. Understandably upset by these things, he leaves to become a hermit and swears that he'll never trust humanity again for all of the things they've done wrong. Now that he knows how to read and write, though, he discovers that there are several letters and papers and documentations in the clothing that he was born in. Upon reading it, he learns the truth of his creation, that he was made by one Victor Frankenstein, something, something, something. How did you pronounce it? The college he went to?
Oh, where did he go?
Ingolstadt.
That. I'm not going to try and say it because I'd mess it up, but he discovers Victor Frankenstein's location and goes there to meet him. Upon the way, he encounters Victor Frankenstein's brother, William, and kills him. Upon doing so, he frames the family's servant girl, Justine, and, skedaddles off. Victor Frankenstein hears of this, suspects that it's the creature, but doesn't actually do anything to save Justine from being tried and executed, even though he knows she's innocent, which, kind of a jerk move, man.
A little sketchy.
The creature meets him, speaks with him, and accuses him of making his life miserable and abandoning his creation when all he wanted was love and happiness. So he demands that Victor Frankenstein make him a female Frankenstein monster to be his companion and bride and understand him and love him so that he can finally be happy and thus be virtuous again, because his misery is what makes him so prone to murdering people. So if he was happy, he could be virtuous and nice again. Frankenstein, not wanting to watch more people get murdered, agrees and begins crafting the female Frankenstein in Orkney, I believe, with Clerval accompanying him. Side note, Clerval is my favorite character in this story. While he's in the process of making female Frankenstein, he becomes very concerned with the possibility that the female Frankenstein is supposed to marry the other Frankenstein. And married people canoodle, and canoodling has the possibility of creating children. What if this female Frankenstein gives birth to more baby Frankensteins? This possibility is very horrifying to him, so he destroys the female Frankenstein before he can finish creating it, thus absolutely enraging the creature, who kills Clerval as revenge, and threatens to come back to him on his wedding night. Interestingly, Frankenstein didn't just, remove reproductive organs from the female Frankenstein. He crafted her out of a hodgepodge of corpses. Presumably, it would not have been hard to just not include those pieces. But apparently, he didn't think of that. Anyway, he goes off to marry his childhood friend / kind of sister / love interest, Elizabeth, who was the very pretty once rich, once poor, now rich again person that I mentioned at the beginning. And he has Frankenstein's monsters. Oh, gosh. He has the creature's warning that he's going to come back to him on his wedding night. He doesn't do anything about this and proceeds to get married anyway, upon which, when the creature comes to his house and kills Elizabeth on their wedding night, he's so shocked and dismayed and despaired. Oh no, you totally didn't see this coming. Proceeds to swear vengeance on Frankenstein's monster and chases him all the way down to the Arctic, which is where he is then picked up by our good friend, Captain Robert. From there, Captain Robert's crew said, "Hey, we saw this giant guy on a dog sled." And he's like, "Yep, that's my man." And then he dies. Just of the weakness. He was so weak that he died. Presumably it was like hypothermia or something, considering they were in the Arctic and
Probably.
he'd been
Right.
under massive amounts of stress and exhaustion. But yeah, Frankenstein just kind of keels over. The creature boards the ship from there, kind of sort of mourns him, and tells Robert to just, remember him, that he's planning on burning himself on a pyre, so the creature, commits suicide, putting an end to the whole affair. And all of this is summed up in letters to Captain Robert's sister, Margaret. He just really wanted to get her that drama.
That's right. Okay, that's a great summary. Good job, Abby.
I do my best.
That was awesome. Very, very well done. Okay, Cameron, did you want to before obviously Avi's going to have a bunch of things she wants to talk about as well, but I know Cameron might be short on time here. What do you want to hit on, Cameron?
Couple points. The Arctic is north of Europe, so he had to go up, not down.
My bad.
That's a good one. Love it.
Maybe they circumnavigated the globe. You don't know.
It's in St. Petersburg, Russia, and went north to the North Pole.
Okay.
Anyway,
was that the main thing?
Where else was I was going to go? I do find it interesting that truly like the most wholesome character in the entire book is killed during basically the manic episode that he has when he learns that he's not going to get his wife, which is really sad.
Yeah.
Wholesome character are you referring to? Oh, Clerval, of course.
Clerval, yeah.
Yes.
Clerval is like generally like the most wholesome character in the entire book.
Uh-huh.
That you actually get to know.
And he's killed in a fit of manic when the creature realizes he's not going to get his wife. Okay, I understand.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
Second most wholesome guy is the blind man.
Yeah, the blind man's he's up there. I have not fully finished the book, so I am tainted by young Frankenstein, and all I can think of is a bat. Anyway, we won't go into that.
Okay.
But that's
okay.
Funny. As Abby actually pointed out earlier, while we were talking, waiting for our loathsome friend who has decided not to show up and grace us with his presence.
Graced or
cursed?
Darkened our day. Made our day more unique. Maybe that. I don't know. Anyway, he'll get a kick out of this. As I try to steal his birthright from his father. Anyway. Okay. I don't know where I was going now. I'm totally
tangent.
Out of the beginning of this before Tim joined.
It'd be hilarious if you joined right now. Yeah, basically wholesome character there.
Yeah.
And with Avi, that it's really just like this randomness of we're just going to do this letter and just like this is how I'm doing. I'm probably going to die, so don't worry. And he's like this super melancholy guy at the start, and then Victor's also super melancholy, probably because of his, stupidity of not listening to his family and trying to think that he's actually better than his professors. But I mean, he did get some accolades from them in the early chapters from his professors, actually right after he did the animation of the monster, when he was being resuscitated. His professors were like, "Oh, this man is brilliant. He's going to teach us all science," and kind of scared him more because he was like, "No, we should not be teaching this. This is not okay."
Yeah. So that's one of the big themes of the book. Then, right, is the hubris of Frankenstein and
the atrocities that you can commit in the pursuit of more knowledge and the pursuit of science and understanding.
Yeah, exactly.
So, if we think about that,
aren't meant to be understood.
If we think about that, if knowledge is the fire that Prometheus gave us, did Frankenstein do a good job in not telling us how he did it?
There you go. Well,
should the gods have withheld knowledge from us? I don't know. Those are some deeper thoughts that we can think upon this Hallows Eve, while we try to get scared.
Well, we look at the grunting monster.
While other things.
Yeah.
See, well, my addendum to that though is that the knowledge he was trying to pursue was the secret of life, and withholding that information is all well and good, but like women are right there. Do we really need the secret of life when we already have a life creation process
Mm, mm. Yeah,
So
that
should we
doesn't
use
end in
the
murder?
creators of life better? Is that what
uh,
you're getting at?
I'm saying
Well-
maybe it's just not men's place to attempt to create human people,
You're right.
especially
Piece
when
them
those
together.
human people are created out of corpses.
So
Well, yeah,
we
that's
should
a bad way
create
to start. A what?
a more nurturing way. We should
Oh, yeah.
use creation.
We
Yeah.
should plant seeds in the ground that just grow people.
Isn't that from another horror movie, Children of the Corn?
Well, this does. I feel like I mean, there's a lot different from this book and A Brave New World, but I feel like there are some similar themes with just the idea of the dangers of technology and the idea that unchecked scientific ambition is problematic. And that what I'd like to see though is a good book where the alchemist is the good guy, because it feels like alchemy is really frowned on all the time.
I have this great show for you. It's called Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Gosh.
All right, that sounds awesome. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, let me hit on a couple things here that I wanted to talk about.
I
Okay,
just
so
want to say we have banned cloning. Just think of Dory the sheep when we were
oh
younger.
yeah,
That
right.
that as the science community was like, glad
I
that
don't
we
know.
did this, but we see
Right.
some issues. But then
Right.
again, we want to bring back like
Yeah.
woolly mammoths now and things like
Right,
that.
exactly.
So
We recently, yeah, the
Dire
whole
wolf.
the wolf, yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Maybe we've learned, maybe we haven't. Maybe we'll figure it out. But a couple notes. So the structure of the book, like both Cameron and Avi have already touched on, was unique. It said, I was reading about it. It said this layered style called the frame narrative is that was created for psychological depth and moral ambiguity, because you're getting the story from different perspectives. So it's hard to like when you get the omniscient narrator, it's like, oh well, we know who the good guy is and who the bad guy is. It's
Unreliable
relatively
narrators! Yay!
right. I think it's pretty like easy to see Frankenstein as like certainly not the good guy, but like
Sympathetic figure on account of his
right, maybe,
entire family getting murdered.
right, exactly.
that reminds me where I was actually trying to go. Victor and the first guy that we meet, who just is there for like what,
Robert.
4 chapters. The ship captain,
Robert.
Robert.
Yeah.
They only became friends because they were both super melancholy. Because they both were super depressive. That's the only reason they became friends. And Victor was like, "Oh, I see myself in you. Let me tell you my story." And that is just so like, I mean, I guess if we're going like, if we want to go like therapist, that's true empathy. You know, they
Right.
they jumped down in the pit with them and said, here's my horribleness.
Yeah.
Have at it. So, I mean, I guess we can pull some good morals out of this, but I don't know.
Yeah. I think there are, the main thing that for this book, I mean, with all the different, ideas and morals and thoughts, that it kind of creates this whole like, and I feel like a lot of books back then did, but the Gothic ethos kind of permeates every aspect of it. It's kind of like, it's beautiful, it's super detailed, and it's like dark.
Also grotesque.
Right, exactly. So somehow darkly grotesque and beautiful, and like you just feel like it's something you want to see. It's like, but it like it's just it makes you sad in the end. It makes you melancholy and just, and so it really creates this whole environment for you that I think is really unique and interesting. And I love, by the way, just as a opinion, I love the book general. I love like you said, Avi said that the monster learns to read and speak from Paradise Lost, and
I didn't mention that actually. Yes, the first book he ever reads is Paradise Lost, which is really funny to me.
Right. Yeah. And for those of you that have read Paradise Lost, I would not start with that. Bit of a rough start, but it does then heavily contrast with
Kind of guides his mentality, I think.
It does, right. And yeah, and it talks about how he sees himself as like the Adam character, like he should be Frankenstein's Adam, but he becomes like the wretch, the fiend, the demon,
the fallen
and
angel.
Right, exactly. And so it's it does guide his thought, and even when he's talking about when he wants a companion, when he wants the woman, he says, "I am alone." So this is a quote from the book: "I'm alone and miserable. You must create a female for me with whom I can live in the interchange of those sympathies necessary for my being." It's a far cry from the grunting Frankenstein. Well, and we call it
portrayed
actually
in the media.
Right, exactly. Though, I think
I was gonna make a comment.
the
Kind of dark, beautiful, yet also grotesque aesthetic of the Gothic culture is perfectly encapsulated by the fact that the creature speaks French. Beautiful, yet grotesque.
We have French listeners, Abby. I mean, let's, or we did.
You need to take some of the vowels out of your language.
Yes. I do. I mean, like I said, I think the language aspect of it, like I guess some of the negative critiques about the book when it was first written was that this was like pretty. It was unrealistic to say that the monster could learn to read and write from Paradise Lost and all these other things, and it's like, okay, well, yeah,
I mean,
it's also science
iPad
fiction,
kids
so.
Nowadays are learning to speak Tagalog just from listening to Filipino dramas on their YouTube, so
Hey,
it's not too far-fetched.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, I find that kind of a lame complaint against the book, honestly, because I loved it, and like I said, I love that it like creates this monster that speaks in this like poetic verse, and it's like, okay,
Very
this is fun.
eloquent.
Yeah, exactly. And even while he's a mass murderer, and during the course of the book, the monster kills, I believe it's 5 people, and so I mean, he's a mass
William,
murderer.
then inadvertently Justine, then Clairval, and Elizabeth. 4 people?
Is it?
Also, a comment that I just wanted to make that I forgot to mention because everyone forgets to mention it because it's literally not important. Everyone's like, "Oh no, Victor Frankenstein, he got his entire family murdered. After Elizabeth died, his parents died of the sad." He has an older brother named Ernest who's still there. It's just that nobody cares about him.
That's right. Yeah, the forgotten
his
brother.
entire family except Ernest.
And one caveat before I jump off really fast, it's Tagalog, not Tagalog.
Oh, my bad. Apologies. That's a word that I really only read.
Right.
So
it's okay. No worries.
Yeah.
It's all right. No worries. I'm gonna hop off really quick.
Okay.
I wish
thanks
all
for
our
joining, Cameron.
listeners adieu. And we'll see you again later.
All right.
Podcast. Okay.
Bye, Cameron.
Thanks for joining, Cameron. Avi and I will wrap it up here without you. Okay. A few more things to touch on, Avi, before I give my my teased insight into the book that I think might be unique-ish. The thing that you mentioned, the baby monster, the idea that they're going to, I think you phrased it, canoodle, and then and why doesn't he just remove the female anatomy? This is, once again, this is the science fiction. This is the fantasy aspect where you're like, as soon as you introduce things that are not scoped by reality, like it's like so the way my brother-in-law phrased this, which I've really my children would tell you I say this all the time, is in the Toy Story 3, or is it 2?
Oh,
I don't
good.
remember which one. Okay, this is relevant. At the beginning, they're like playing. Andy's playing with his toys, and like they're fighting or something, and the dog has a shield, and so it can't be hurt. And then suddenly the dinosaur's there, and he's like, "Oh, but I brought my dinosaur that eats force field dogs," um, which is my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
That is the phrase now I use anytime something is not realistic, or like, what about in Harry Potter? Why can't we use the time turner to go back and okay? It's I
The time
brought
turners were all
my
destroyed, but also
oh,
sorry, my
okay.
bad. I know too much about things.
Okay, but yes, it's literally I brought my dinosaur that eats force field dogs. It's like you're kind of hosed over by the fact that you've bid reality adieu, and you're now moving
Hmm.
into the like so
It
could
doesn't
he have
serve the narrative to have that
exactly
solution so obvious.
exactly,
I
and that's
just
what
like
it comes
making
down
fun of
to,
Victor
right?
Frankenstein, to be honest. I just
Okay,
think
that's good. Yeah, right.
see, my big complaint with Victor Frankenstein is that he's the face of the mad scientist trope. He's like, "Oh, I'll do it all in pursuit of science. Ah ha 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 ha. Ah ha ha." But he doesn't. He gives up. He drops out. He runs away scared because the monster has yellow eyes and also apparently yellow skin. He's
Right.
not the mad scientist you all think he is. But you know who is? You know who could be? You know who could serve as the face of mad, blind pursuit of science that we all deserve? Dr. Jekyll from Jekyll and Hyde. That's right. This is a promo. I'm
Yeah.
I'm being sponsored by Jekyll and Hyde. He is an actual doctor. He performs his unethical experiments on himself instead of on random corpses. He doesn't run away screaming and in fact face the consequences of what he does. I just think that
That's the
he could
one.
be the mad scientist we need, but maybe
Yeah,
not the
let's
one we deserve.
Okay. All right. Well, all of the references going here. I think it's worth. We can start this as like a grassroots movement to unseat Frankenstein and enthrone Dr. Jekyll. But
Exactly.
I mean, one listener at a time. But I do think it's important to. You touched on a couple things that one more theme of the book before we is that like taking responsibility for your actions, right? Like,
Yeah,
um,
that's a big one.
and it's huge, right? Like, because the monster in its infantile state was not a murderer, and
Mhm.
had Victor actually taken a responsibility for his creation, the book plays out as a romance or something, as opposed
That's just the
to
plot of Powerpuff Girls. Powerpuff Girls is what would happen if Victor Frankenstein had actually taken care of his creation.
There you go, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, just the idea that when you create something, you have to be
You
in
have to
charge
follow
of
through.
it.
You have to be responsible for
Exactly.
it.
Right. Right. Regardless of how it makes you feel, like how you might feel about it later. Is don't abandon
Even if you see
your
yourself in
responsibility.
its horrible face,
Right.
you
Sure.
still have to
Exactly.
raise your child.
Right. Yeah. And
Which brings me to my next fun fact, which is one I've been saving up.
okay. Shoot.
So, Frankenstein is a story about a man who creates life and then shirks all responsibility for it and its actions from that point forward. He brings this thing into the world, abandons it, leaves it off to its own devices, and then suffers the consequences of that later down the line. And this is a story that Mary Shelley wrote at the age of 18, which she then dedicated to her father.
Right.
And I think
So,
that that's that's a very fun fact. Um,
uh,
One of the other themes of just taking responsibility for actions not only is how Frankenstein reacts to the creature, but it's also how he reacts to the murders. He doesn't step up and say, "Hey, I know what's going on or what's doing this." When he receives the creature's threats, he doesn't say, "Okay, I'm going to put a stop to this no matter how. I'm going to put a
right.
stop to it." He just kind of lets it happen.
Right. Right.
he knows that Frankenstein is he knows that the creature is going to kill his wife, and yet he just goes along with it anyways.
Right. Yeah. He seems like, yeah, completely incapacitated by his own fear, and
Mhm.
yeah, and then that
And
brings
apparently
him to
desire to
guilt.
marry his childhood friend's sister.
Well, that may have been a deep-seated psychological issue that he had, regardless of the whole monster
Mm,
issue. But
that's true.
um, but yeah, the guilt that he has. So that's something very common in a lot of these classic books. I'm thinking of like Crime and Punishment and things like that, where like guilt
Mhm.
essentially drives you mad. And so Frankenstein. That's how he ends up. Right, once his wife, or his wife to be, is killed, he goes, I'm going to go get revenge, and pursues it until he
Mhm.
dies. So
Which is also the plot of Star Wars. Um,
right, right. Okay. I was going to
one
hit
last
that
thing,
last.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go for it.
Sorry, one last thing I wanted to mention. We were talking about the format of the story and how it's
Yeah.
done as letters, which creates the unreliable narrator effect. But what it also does is it creates this framing of a story contained within another story, which is in
Mm,
itself contained within another story, which reminded
right.
me of two other works of fiction. The first being Arabian Nights, which is a series of stories that are told within another story. Um, in a very interesting way. The second being Bram Stoker's Dracula,
Mm,
which
okay.
also is formatted in this sort of letters to someone else who's not part of the narrative just yet, although in Dracula she joins the narrative later, um, in a way that really affects the way that information is conveyed through the story. Um, and
Mm.
kind of that format of information transfer really affects how the story plays out and how the reader experiences the story, which is really interesting to me actually.
Yeah. So interestingly, I saw this in one of the facts I looked up. So one of the group that was writing this ghost story, along with Mary Shelley, who, was John Polidori. I don't know if that's how you say
Mhm.
his name, but and it said his story became the first modern vampire story, which later inspired Dracula. So we uh, we have some modern, some similar ideas there. Um,
Mhm.
okay,
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 go
here
ahead
it
with
is.
your
You ready
teaser.
for this, Abby?
I'm
This
sorry.
one's
I'm
this
done.
one's
Yeah,
really
go ahead.
exciting. No, you're good. This is okay. I may have even mentioned this book on the podcast before. I talked to a lot of people about it in the last, I don't know, year and a half, 2 years since I read it. I don't remember when it came out, but I read it shortly after it came out. It's called The Wager. The Wager is a true story, about a ship, and a shipwreck, and mutiny and murder, and a part of the crew survives this like truly hostile environment of South Chile, and finds a way to get home after more than a year, or a couple years for a few of them. Um, it's just truly amazing story, and like I said, true story. Like the author, I don't
Based on
know.
real events.
Correct. Yeah, and the author does I think, an incredible job, and of making it feel very like novel-ish in points, as opposed to some of these can be kind of dry reads, but this one's actually pretty good, as far as just holding your attention and kind of moving the narrative forward. But
Mhm.
one of the main, I think the main source for the whole book is a young man. I don't remember what his first name is, but his last name is Byron. Uh, who
Dun dun dun.
Correct, exactly. Grandson is Lord Byron, and
It all comes
uh,
full circle.
boom, So it turns out, so and so this whatever, but the Byron that was on the wager goes back and eventually publishes his account of what happened on the wager and everything. It actually became pretty well known in the time, and I mean just all of the atrocity that happened and surviving in extreme conditions and turning on each other and murder, and these are stories he would have told his kids and grandkids. Well,
Mhm.
his grandkids was Lord Byron, and who was Mary Shelley with when they, on in the lead up to her writing Frankenstein? Lord
Lord
Byron.
Byron. That makes it
So,
extra funny because Percy Shelley, who was also part of that friend group, had a complete fascination with the ocean and, like, sea in that type of gothic way of horror and yet beauty, and in fact, went out on the sea so many times, despite refusing to learn how to swim, that is how he died.
wow. Okay, that's
Maybe it's contagious.
All right, I like it. Um, so yeah, that's what I was teasing was the wager and the Frankenstein and Frankenstein probably don't have a direct core, but I do think that there's a thread here that we could take as far as there are a bunch of things in Mary Shelley's life that probably led her to write the book, but her
Mhm.
influence from Lord Byron may have been influenced by his grandfather, who shared these stories of surviving, like, so the North Pole. They were in the South, this island, and if you read the wager, that was essentially just windswept and ice and just as miserable experience for a long time. And then there's murder and there's defiance and all kinds of stuff. So
It's basically
um,
Lord of the Flies before Lord of the Flies.
exactly, except it's men instead of children. But yeah, correct. So um, yeah, that was I think something interesting. I said I didn't see the connection when I read the wager after reading Frankenstein. I read Frankenstein quite a while ago and then just refreshed it before this podcast. But I
Sigh.
think that what
I reread Frankenstein for this.
ah okay, very nice. Um, okay. Anyway, anything last to add here, Abby, before
Yes,
we sign off?
actually. You mentioned that, John Polidori, I'm probably also saying that wrong, wrote
Yeah,
what is credited with being one of the first modern vampire stories.
right.
Well, I remembered something and decided to look it up to see if I was right. There was one that is very well known before that, and that is called Carmilla, which is a Gothic
Hmm.
novella by Irish author Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, and it was written in 1872, one of the earliest known works of vampire literature, predating Dracula by 25 years. And Carmilla is a female vampire who um, has the typical vampiric desire, predatory possessiveness towards the
Hmm.
female protagonist. And it's a very interesting story, and I highly recommend it. And also, it was before the other vampire stories, which makes it
Oh,
better,
okay.
obviously.
That's right. Hey, I like tracing, yeah, the origin, not just the, the easy answer, but yeah, the dig a little bit deeper answer. So good. I like it. Good job. Okay,
Hmm.
so at the end here, I think it's worth mentioning that the last fact that I saw when I was looking up was that there are actually two different. There was a different ending to Frankenstein originally.
That is
Um,
true.
right, and then Mary Shelley rewrote it in 13 years later to essentially make the monster seem more tragic. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I like that she makes the monster relatable, and I think the rewrite, like I said, I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed the ending. I haven't read the 1818 version. Um, I have to dig in further to find that, but essentially, it was saying that the creature just drifts away, planning on dying, but doesn't like may have the whole speech. I think where he says, "I'm going to go burn myself at a pyre." So,
Hmm.
um, yeah. Anyway,
I liked it both personally, but yeah, it
you
was
read both
interesting.
endings.
Yes, I did.
Okay,
Um,
nice.
the which brings me to another topic that I will cover briefly, I promise,
Shoot.
where it this story doesn't have a clear-cut villain. Part of the
Mm,
aspect of that unreliable narration is like, "Oh, but Victor Frankenstein does all these bad things," and, "Oh, but the creature is a murderer." So, it portrays both sides as very sympathetic.
right.
Now, modern cultural interpretations of the story, um, in ye old days of, like, the boomers, the creature was portrayed much less favorably. He was this
Mhm,
grunting, incoherent monster all the time.
right.
Um, Now, more modern interpretations are a lot more likely to interpret the creature's life favorably. Uh, because well, not life, but the creature himself favorably because of
Sure,
how clear it is that he's a victim of the circumstances. And though his actions were wrong, his anger is justified. And I think
sure.
that's very interesting and might have
Mm.
something to say about the parenting styles of the two generations.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's true. I think we see that that just the generations as we read this book have different insights into like who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, who's being mistreated, how are we being raised. So yeah, think that's a great way to finish up. We do have multiple generations listening. We have probably a good cohort of high school and college age kids, and then some people a little bit older, as myself, and then some that are probably significantly more insightful than we are, that are our elders, and we
Like
appreciate everyone
grandma.
listening. Yeah, exactly. Grandma's listening. All
Thank you,
right. Well,
grandma. I love you.
okay. Tim, give us your thoughts on kind of the plot as a whole.
Okay. So it was kind of surreal to read Frankenstein, just because, I mean, growing up and feeling so familiar with it, and yet not, having no idea what the actual story of Frankenstein was about. So yeah, it's kind of cool to read. Um, I will be honest that as a child of the new millennium, I am accustomed to a faster pace, and the romantic era, you know, literature is just sometimes I just catch myself tapping my feet and saying, "All right, I get it, move on." But and part of that is I think we all need to learn to do this as readers is to learn to set aside kind of the taste of the age that we were brought up in and learn to appreciate something from another age on its own merits. And so, yeah, the although I would probably condense it a bit if I were, preparing it for a modern audience, I appreciate it. It certainly had some actions and suspense. Not knowing what was going to happen when the next, and knowing that the next terrible thing to happen, and so I appreciated that. Mary Shelley kept us going with that suspense. I was
Okay. Yeah. So give me your thoughts on who the most relatable character is, and who's the villain in the story.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question because I was thinking about it. And this is actually one of the reasons why I think Frankenstein has been considered and will continue to be considered a classic. And that is that and so I'm going to go off for a second about capturing the human experience. Classic works of art, and including literature, capture the human experience in a way that maybe lesser productions don't. And not to be too elitist, I love me a good, dime novel or a good cheap action movie. They're fun, but they won't last. The people won't be studying them in depth years to come because there's something that classics do when they capture the human experience. They have a more sophisticated and more detailed view of what life is really like. And if you walk around and look in your own life, you're not going to see too many clear-cut villains. On occasion, you might, but it's really quite rare. And especially if you have the ability to look at their life from their perspective, they may feel like a villain to you, but when they go home to their family, they're probably not a villain, right? Or in another context. And so, again, not to cast shade on so many of the movies we watch and the books we read, but they're just kind of elementary and simplistic. There's a clear-cut villain who's usually just a megalomaniacal, just doing evil for the sake of evil, which is fun, but it's not real. That's not what life is really like. And so I've always had this pet peeve about the good versus evil in a lot of the media that we consume. In Frankenstein here, it's not clear who the villain is. I definitely get Frankenstein from his perspective, and although he does some boneheaded things that I'm like, you dweeb, why'd you do that? The mistakes are mistakes that humans would make. In my mind, the principal flaw, okay, one of the principal flaws of Frankenstein is his act of neglect. He does this incredible thing, bringing new life into the world, and then immediately, because of fear and disgust and who knows what underlying issues, he runs away and does nothing to clean up his mess or to follow up on it, and which is, in my mind, in a sense, pretty criminal. You can understand his monster's deep, not just frustration, but rage at having been neglected and given life and then dropped and abandoned. So does that make Frankenstein the villain? And again, I want to just point out here the nuance here. Although I was just kicking, come on, Frankenstein, you don't do that, you idiot. At the same time, is that a realistic thing? Are there people who bring life into the world and then act with gross neglect? Tragically, yes, it happens all the time. And it's all over the place. Children who have grown up without the love or influence of a parent who ran the other way for whatever reason. And so that's a human failing, a human flaw, an instance of human villainy. But does that make Frankenstein the villain? Uh, I would not argue that. I think it makes him a flawed character, perhaps a tragic hero, as all tragic heroes have their fatal flaw. And I'm not even get into whether his other fatal flaw was the kind of the Icarus failing of having too much confidence in himself and pushing into unknown territory with reckless abandon without sufficient humility to take stock and to think of the consequences and so forth. So there's a whole other slice that we just don't have time to talk about. Um,
It's a
but
long way of getting
anyways,
a long
oh,
way of
sorry,
getting the answer. Yeah, the long way of getting the answer wrong, Tim. The answer is the blind man. So I'm sorry.
the
No points
blind man,
awarded.
and because people with disabilities are just villainous, full stop, right? It, don't and Carl, I'm looking at you when you. Sorry, I'm trying to be as offensive as possible.
I know. Yeah, no, we
But
we actually are not against anyone with any type of disability. It turns out, but yes.
especially if you subscribe to our channel.
uh, what was the thing I was going to say? Otherwise, I had an input about one of the things you said.
The blind man.
No, it wasn't the blind man part. That was
Flaw,
me.
that was a flawed hero, tragic flaw. Um,
I don't know.
Icarus.
Oh, Icarus.
And
Okay. Well, the other thing I was going to say is that you missed the main flaw of Frankenstein, that he married his adopted sister, which is super weird, or was going to. So,
I looked that up, and in the original manuscript, if I'm not mistaken in what I read, she was actually his cousin,
yeah.
for
Yeah.
reals.
Okay.
And then in later editions, they changed it to be just adopted. But
Yeah.
yeah, anytime you're writing a love letter and addressing your romantic interest as cousin, yeah, I've got some beef. That's
Yeah. All right, one more.
okay. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Okay, now one other. So let me address the monster as the villain, and again, by the end of the story, he certainly fits that mold in a certain way, right? He's prowling. He's stalking the Frankenstein and picking off and murdering one by one his loved ones. That's pretty villainous. Um,
Yeah.
but and if you wanted to stop and look at it there, and which is kind of what I think sometimes happens with interpretations and iterations of Frankenstein, they'll kind of simplify it, then fine. But hearing the monster uh, describe his experience makes him totally relatable. You
Mm-hmm.
feel, and in fact, I think my most emotionally invested moments of this book were not when Frankenstein was, dreading the next appearance of the monster and his next loss.
Mm-hmm.
It was the monster approaching the family and the blind man and hoping to befriend them and to develop a relationship with them, and knowing in the back of my mind that that was not going to happen in this book, and dreading to see it happen. That was my most emotionally invested moment. So I suppose if I were picking who was most relatable, for me it'd be Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah.
So is he a villain? Here, a victim of gross neglect, of isolation, um, and yes, he comes to do terrible things, but who is to blame for that? Again, a telltale sign of a classic is, you could have all sorts of conversations about the deep implications in this story. What is the role of agency, and who is responsible for the choices I make and the effects that they have? Where do we draw the line the um, between the effects of my error in hurting others and their own choices as motivated and influenced by my choices? Where does one person's responsibility begin and another's end? Um, and I love one of the things I love about Frankenstein is I think that it's a contemplation on the drastic difference that roles can have and that choice can have in shaping someone's identity. You have these drastically different um, pictures of the monster. One, the gentle, the eater of acorns in the forest, who saves a helpless girl in the river, who nobly cuts firewood and helps out a impoverished family, and who seeks to understand and learn and learns so much. And then at another point of the story, you have this enraged, revenge killing, relentless monster, um, and they're both the same being. And for me, that's actually another touch of reality. I think we see that in, you hear stories about people coming out of prison, and they've done horrible things, but then they've had an experience that changed them, and they turn their lives around, and they're the same person, but they've learned, they've grown, and they've learned to use their agency, their choice, in a different way. um, and you have things that can go the other way too. Someone who is kind and sensitive and good, going through experiences and turning a different direction and becoming vindictive and spiteful. And honestly, on a micro scale, we all do that every day as we respond to our world. And something makes me angry, and then I do something that I regret later, or something inspires me and I do something that's good and noble. So I think we can take from Frankenstein that lesson that the seeds of good and evil are in all of us, and we we how are we going to respond to the world around us, to the choices of others, to make the best world for ourselves. And
Mhm.
I think the story teaches that lesson well.
Okay, so if I had to sum up your thoughts, just so essentially, Blind Man is the antagonist, so he's the bad guy, and the mass murdering monster is the somewhat conflicted but relatable protagonist, the good guy.
That's right. If you get out of this,
Okay, that's
Tim
what I
can
got. All
relate
right.
to mass murderers. There we go. That's a
Okay. Interesting take, Tim. Well,
that's right.
let's.
This is why I'm so big on talk radio. I have the hot takes that catch people's attention.
That's right. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah, thank you for your input, Tim. And yeah, I will add this onto the end of the podcast. So this will be like an Easter egg. Well, I'll put it before the closing music or
An
something,
Easter
I
egg.
think.
Stay tuned for Tim's hot takes.
Yeah. Something like that. Yes.
There we go.
And thank you for listening, everyone. We will be back again soon with a new. We got to pick our next book, but we might
I have
pick.
some suggestions.
So I'm currently reading Tale of Two Cities, and I forgot how much I like it. So don't know if that's one you've read, Abby, but
Oh, please. I can't be in this family and have not read Dickens.
Okay. Well, I figured, but some people just do the Christmas Carol and call it good. The Tale of Two Cities is. But yeah, we'll figure one out, and we'll be back again soon. And yeah, thanks.
Thanks for listening. Bye.